What would you do if you couldn't fall asleep for even a single night for 35 years? Imagine thousands of hours spent in darkness, while the whole world around you falls asleep, and you remain alone with your thoughts. In the small village of Vishnevka, lost in the Ural Mountains in 1987, a woman was discovered who, according to medical records and eyewitness accounts, had not slept since 1952. The story of Maria Petrova became one of the most mysterious medical anomalies recorded in the Soviet Union, but for unknown reasons, information about her was kept secret for many years. Today, we will delve into this mystery and try to understand what really happened to the woman who forgot how to sleep. If you are interested in stories about unexplained phenomena based on real events, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes. The first mentions of Maria Petrova's unusual condition were found in the archives of the district hospital of the city of Nizhny Tagil. An old folder with yellowed pages was accidentally discovered during the relocation of the archive to a new building in 2018. No one would have paid much attention to it, if not for the strange note in red ink on the cover, "Top Secret, Experiment as in 1952. Inside were medical charts, photographs, and handwritten notes from doctors who had observed the woman's condition for several decades. Archivist Elena Sokolova, who discovered the documents, recalls that day with extraordinary clarity. It was late autumn, and it was already getting dark outside. I was working alone in the basement of the old hospital building. The air was dry and stuffy. It smelled of old paper and mold. When I opened this folder, the first thing that struck me was a photograph of a woman, her eyes. They were somehow unnaturally bright, as if she was looking through the camera, through time. Even in the black and white picture, it was striking. And then I started reading the medical history and realized that I had found something truly unusual. According to the documents, Maria Petrova was born in 1931 into a family of collective farmers. Until the age of 21, her life was no different from the lives of other young women of that time. She finished 7 grades of rural school, worked on a collective farm, and was going to get married, but one day everything changed. From a medical chart dated June 15, 1952, patient MFA, 21 years old, was admitted to the hospital in a state of extreme exhaustion and nervous agitation, claims that she cannot fall asleep. Hallucinatory phenomena, tremors of the extremities, and periodic loss of orientation have been noted for 14 days. Diagnosis: acute insomnia, possibly of a psychogenic nature. What happened to Maria in the weeks before hospitalization remains unknown. The chart contains only a brief mention that the patient was discovered by neighbors in her own home in a state of severe agitation, shouting that there was someone in the house, someone was watching her at night. Neighbors, concerned about her condition, called a paramedic, who made the decision to hospitalize her. In the first weeks in the hospital, doctors were sure that Maria's condition was temporary and would soon pass. She was prescribed sedatives, underwent physiotherapy procedures, and various methods of that time were used to treat insomnia, but nothing helped. According to the records of the nurses on duty, Maria did not sleep for a minute. She could lie with her eyes closed, but always remained conscious, reacted to sounds, and could hold a conversation. A month later, without successful treatment, something happened that attracted the attention of not only local doctors. An entry appeared in the observation log. The patient demonstrates abnormal brain activity. An electroencephalogram shows the absence of delta waves characteristic of the deep sleep phase, even when potent sedatives are administered. It seems that her brain has completely lost the ability to enter a state of sleep. After this discovery, Maria Petrova was transferred to a closed laboratory located 40 kilometers from Nizhny Tagil. Here, traces in the publicly available archives break off, and the most mysterious part of the story begins. But thanks to the testimonies of people who worked in that laboratory and fragments of documents that have survived, we can reconstruct some of the events of those years. Laboratory number 27, as it was listed in the documents, was formally listed as an institute for the study of nervous diseases, but in reality, it was part of a secret program to study the capabilities of the human body. The laboratory was headed by Professor Viktor Kovalev, a neurophysiologist whose work on the study of sleep was recognized even abroad, despite the Iron Curtain. Petrova's case is a unique phenomenon that can shed light on the very nature of sleep and consciousness. Kovalev wrote in his diary, fragments of which were found many years later by his grandchildren. "We are observing a paradox. An organism that, according to all known scientific data, should have died without sleep in 2 to 3 weeks, continues to function. Moreover, some cognitive functions of the patient demonstrate improvement." Indeed, medical science of that time asserted that prolonged lack of sleep inevitably leads to death. Experiments on animals showed that rats deprived of sleep died after 10 to 15 days. But Maria Petrova not only survived, but also, according to some records, demonstrated unusual abilities. From the observation protocol dated March 1953, the patient exhibits exceptional memory for details, can verbatim reproduce a conversation that took place several weeks ago, demonstrates increased sensitivity to external stimuli, is able to hear a whisper behind the wall, notice the slightest changes in lighting. At the same time, there are no signs of psychosis or other disorders that usually accompany prolonged sleep deprivation. For the next 5 years, Maria Petrova was under constant observation by scientists. They conducted countless tests, measured her brain activity, studied physiological processes, but the cause of her condition could not be established. Some doctors suggested that it could have been caused by a rare form of encephalitis. Others leaned towards the version of a genetic mutation. There were also those who believed that Maria was faking insomnia, although round-the-clock observation and medical tests would seem to rule out such a possibility. In 1958, a new turn occurred in the story of Maria Petrova. After the death of Professor Kovalev from a heart attack, the project to study her condition was closed. The laboratory was disbanded, and Maria was transferred to a psychiatric hospital in Sverdlovsk, now Ekaterinburg, where she was placed in a department for chronic patients. In the hospital records of that period, Maria appears no longer as a unique medical case, but as a patient with chronic psychosis and delusions about the inability to sleep. Medical personnel unfamiliar with her history were skeptical of her claims. "Another strange old woman who thinks she doesn't sleep. We have a whole ward of them," recalls Anna Klimova, quoting her grandmother, who worked as a nurse in that hospital. But there were also several people who knew the truth. One of them, Dr. Andrei Solovyov, a young psychiatrist who started working at the hospital in 1962. In his memoirs, published after the collapse of the USSR, he wrote, "When I first met Maria Petrova, she was already over 30, but she looked much older. Pale skin with a bluish tint, deep-set eyes that seemed never to blink. But the strangest thing was her gaze, piercing, all-seeing. I didn't believe her story until I spent several night shifts in her ward. She really didn't sleep. She could sit motionless for hours staring at one point or quietly talking to herself." Solovyov became interested in Maria's case and began his own investigation. He contacted former employees of Laboratory Number 27, studied the surviving documents, and gradually a picture began to emerge before him that went beyond the scope of an ordinary medical case. It turned out that, shortly before the onset of her insomnia, Maria Petrova was one of the participants in an archaeological expedition excavating an ancient settlement in the Ural Mountains. The expedition was organized by the local history museum, and Maria, as a local resident, worked as an assistant, preparing food for the archaeologists, washing clothes, and performing various errands. From the memoirs of the head of the expedition, Professor of Archaeology Igor Vassiliev. "These were very interesting excavations. We discovered a settlement dating back to the early Iron Age, presumably belonging to the Ikil culture. But the most mysterious find was a small stone altar with unusual symbols. It was located in a deep cave, and we stumbled upon it by chance. I remember how one of the local women working with us showed particular interest in this find. She stood by the altar for a long time, touched it, although we asked her not to touch the artifacts. The woman Professor Vassiliev was talking about was Maria Petrova, and it was after returning from the expedition that she began to have trouble sleeping. Solovyov suggested that there might be a connection between these events, but he had no proof. In addition, Maria herself never mentioned the expedition in conversations with doctors. When Solovyov tried to ask her about it, she clammed up and refused to speak. What's even stranger is that no official documents about that archaeological expedition could be found, as if it had been erased from history. Professor Vassiliev died in 1975, and other members of the expedition either died or refused to discuss the topic. In 1967, Dr. Solovyov was unexpectedly transferred to another hospital thousands of kilometers from Sverdlovsk. He was strictly forbidden to continue research related to Maria Petrova. I was directly told that if I didn't stop digging into this case, I could say goodbye not only to my career, but also to my freedom, he wrote in his memoirs. After that, Maria Petrova again disappeared from public view. There is no mention of her in medical archives until 1987, when she reappears in documents, but in a completely different place in a small psychiatric clinic in the village of Vishnevka, not far from the city of Zlatoust. By that time, Maria was already 56 years old, but according to eyewitness accounts, she looked like a very old woman. Skin like parchment, hair completely white, hands trembling, only the eyes are alive, bright as a young person's, recalled Galina Pronikiva, a nurse who worked in that clinic. But the most surprising thing was that, according to medical records, Maria Petrova still had not slept for 35 years without sleep. This seemed impossible, contradicting all the laws of physiology, but multiple observations conducted in various medical institutions over the decades confirmed this fact. In 1987, in the wake of Perestroika and Glasnost, the case of Maria Petrova attracted the attention of journalists. A correspondent for the local newspaper Zlatoust worker, Nikolai Karpov, hearing stories about a woman who doesn't sleep, decided to write an article about it. He visited the clinic, met with Maria, and spoke with the staff. I expected to see a crazy old woman who babbles about her insomnia, but before me sat a calm, adequate woman who spoke clearly and distinctly. She didn't try to convince me of her uniqueness, didn't complain about fate, just talked about her life as something ordinary. I haven't slept for 35 years. I'm used to it. During the day, I work in the garden at the hospital. At night, I read or look out the window, and sometimes I talk to them. To my question, who she was talking to, Maria just smiled and said, "They only come to me," Karpov wrote in his article, which was never published. The editor-in-chief of the newspaper refused to print the material, considering it mystical nonsense, and soon after that, Karpov was fired. But the draft of the article was preserved in his personal archive, and many years later his daughter passed these materials on to researchers of unexplained phenomena. What is especially interesting in Karpov's notes is the mention of them, with whom Maria allegedly spoke at night. Earlier medical documents also mention that the patient periodically had conversations with invisible interlocutors. Doctors attributed this to hallucinations caused by chronic insomnia and mental disorder, but Maria herself never considered these interlocutors to be a figment of her imagination. From a record of a conversation with Dr. Solovyov dated 1965, "They are real. I only see them when it's completely dark. They come from the shadows. At first I was afraid, thought I was going crazy, but then I realized that they didn't want to harm me. They just want me to listen. They tell me about places that are not on the map, about times that have long passed. Sometimes they show me pictures, images that appear right in the air. I see ancient cities, strange creatures, stars that are not in our sky." Dr. Solovyov in his notes suggested that these visions could be a consequence of changes in Maria's brain due to many years of sleep deprivation. It is known that even short-term sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations in healthy people. What happens to a brain deprived of sleep for decades? Science of that time could not answer. But there was another theory that Solovyov expressed only in personal notes not intended for publication. He suggested that the mysterious stone altar found during the archaeological expedition might be related to the ancient shamanic practices of the peoples of the Urals. According to legends, shamans could enter a special state of trance in which they gained access to other worlds and communicated with spirits. This state was similar to wakefulness, but differed from ordinary consciousness. What if Maria somehow activated an ancient mechanism associated with these practices? What if her brain really functions in some alternative mode unknown to modern science? Solovyov wrote, "This hypothesis, of course, went beyond the scope of the scientific approach and was never considered by official medicine. But it is worth noting that in the archives of Laboratory Number 27, records were found of unusual patterns of Maria's brain activity that did not correspond to either a state of wakefulness or any known phases of sleep. The patient's brain demonstrates activity that we cannot classify within the framework of existing ideas about states of consciousness, noted Professor Kovalev in one of the reports. In 1988, Maria Petrova's health deteriorated sharply. She began to lose weight despite increased nutrition. She developed severe anemia and began to have heart problems. Doctors suggested that her body had finally reached the limit of its capabilities, and the years without sleep began to take their toll. However, Maria herself attributed the deterioration of her condition to other reasons from the diary of night nurse Tatyana Lebedeva. Today MP was very restless. She kept looking at the corner of the ward, whispering something. When I asked her what was wrong, she said, "They say they will come for me soon. They say I know too much, I have seen too much. They no longer want to share their secrets." On the night of November 14th to 15th, 1988, something happened that still remains unexplained. According to the records in the duty log, at 3 a.m., the nurse checked the ward where Maria was located. The patient was awake, sitting on the bed and looking out the window. Nothing unusual was noticed. The next check was at 5 a.m., and Maria had disappeared. The bed was empty, the window was closed, the door locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle or a break-in in the ward. A search operation was immediately organized. The entire hospital grounds, the nearby forest were checked. Staff and patients were interviewed. No one saw or heard anything. Maria Petrova seemed to dissolve into thin air. After a few days, the search was officially terminated. A record appeared in the medical history. The patient voluntarily left the medical institution. Location unknown. But how could an elderly, physically weakened woman imperceptibly get out of a locked ward, overcome a barbed wire fence, and disappear without a trace? This question remained unanswered. In the next few years, after Maria's disappearance, strange rumors began to circulate in the vicinity of Vishnevka. Local residents told stories about a mysterious old woman who was sometimes seen at night on the edge of the forest. She stood motionless, looking at the stars, and seemed to glow with a faint bluish light. When people tried to approach, the figure disappeared. My grandmother swore that she saw her several times. She said that once she dared to get close enough and ask who she was. The old woman turned to her and said, "I am the one who does not sleep, so that you can sleep peacefully," and then disappeared as if melting into the air, says local resident Ivan Kozlov. Of course, such stories can be attributed to village superstitions and a love of mystical tales, but it is interesting that similar testimonies came not only from residents of Vishnevka, but also from other settlements located within a radius of 100 kilometers from the place of Maria's disappearance. In 1992, during the construction of a new road near Vishnevka, workers discovered a strange cave that was not marked on any map. Inside, they found a primitive dwelling, a bed of spruce branches, the remains of a fire, several books, and strange drawings on the walls. The drawings depicted creatures similar to humans, but with disproportionately large heads and eyes, as well as symbols resembling those that were described on the stone altar found by archaeologists in the 50s. Local authorities did not attach much importance to the find, deciding that it was the refuge of some hermit or madman. The cave was examined, the things were confiscated, and the entrance was blocked to avoid attracting the curious. But one of the workers who participated in the survey of the cave claimed that among the things found there was a medallion with the engraved initials MP. I immediately remembered the stories about the crazy old woman from the mental hospital who didn't sleep and ran away.
Maria Petrova, MP.
A coincidence? I don't think so. In addition, there was something strange in the cave. When we went in there, everyone started to feel dizzy, and one guy even had a nosebleed. And also this smell, sweet but not unpleasant, like flowers, but of some non-existent plants, he said. After the collapse of the USSR, many secret archives became more accessible, and researchers of unexplained phenomena were able to gather more information about the case of Maria Petrova. It turned out that laboratory number 27, where she was studied in the 50s, was part of Project Sun Dream, the purpose of which was to study the capabilities of the human consciousness beyond ordinary wakefulness. From declassified documents, the project is aimed at studying alternative states of consciousness and their potential application in the interests of state security. Of particular interest are cases of spontaneous entry into altered states of consciousness without the use of chemicals or physical impact. Maria Petrova was not the only object of study within this project. The documents mention other people with unusual abilities. A woman who could see with her eyes closed, a man capable of feeling the pain of other people, a child who spoke languages he had never studied. But Maria's case was recognized as the most promising for research due to the stability of her condition and the absence of side effects that were observed in other participants. In the archives of Professor Kovalev, records were found that shed light on what could have happened to Maria during the archaeological expedition. Ancient shamans of the Ural peoples practiced rituals associated with conscious refusal of sleep. They believed that after a certain period of wakefulness, the border between worlds thins and a person gains access to knowledge hidden from ordinary people. Some legends mention guardians of the gates, creatures that appear before those who are awake long enough and can either take the soul of a person or endow him with special abilities. Kovalev suggested that the artifact found during the expedition might be related to these rituals. Perhaps Maria, by touching the altar, activated some ancient mechanism that changed the way her brain works. But the professor had no scientific explanation for this process. We are observing a phenomenon that goes beyond the scope of modern science. The patient's brain functions on the basis of principles that are unknown to us, he wrote. One of the most mysterious aspects of the case of Maria Petrova were her conversations with invisible interlocutors. For many years, doctors considered this to be a manifestation of psychosis caused by chronic insomnia. But in the declassified documents of Project Sun, there is mention that some of the information received by Maria from her interlocutors was confirmed from a report dated August 1955. The patient reported a strong earthquake that would occur in 3 days in the area of Lake Baikal, indicated the exact coordinates and the strength of the tremors. The information was confirmed, and the patient refused to explain the source of the information, saying only that they showed her a picture. No fewer than 10 similar cases are recorded in the documents. Maria predicted natural disasters, technical accidents, and sometimes even political events. Not all of her predictions came true. The accuracy was about 60%, but this was much higher than the statistical probability of a random coincidence. When Maria disappeared from the psychiatric clinic in 1988, a secret investigation was organized. KGB officers questioned hospital staff, studied surveillance camera footage, and checked the grounds with the help of sniffer dogs, but found no trace. The final report stated, Object Sova, owl, left the surveillance area. The search yielded no results. The object is probably dead. However, in the 2000s, the story received an unexpected continuation. A woman named Elena Makarova, who worked in the archive of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Ekaterinburg, discovered a strange document. It was an interrogation protocol dated May 1989. 6 months after Maria Petrova's disappearance, a certain Sergei Nikolaevich Lebedev, a gamekeeper of the forestry department in the area of Mount Kosvinsky Kamen, located approximately 150 kilometers from Vishnevka, was interrogated. Lebedev reported a strange encounter in the forest. I was patrolling the area and noticed smoke from a fire. I thought, tourists or poachers. I got closer and saw an old woman sitting by the fire. It was deep night, about 3 a.m. As I approached, she looked at me and said, Hello, Seryoza, Sergey. I knew you would come. I had no idea how she knew my name. She looked strange. Very thin, pale, with completely white hair, but her eyes were bright as a young person's. She invited me to sit next to her and began to tell me such things that made my skin crawl. According to the protocol, the old woman told the gamekeeper that great changes would soon begin. Much will collapse, borders will disappear, but then new ones will appear. Considering that this was said 2 years before the collapse of the USSR, the prediction looks impressive. But the strangest thing was the end of the conversation. She said to me, Tell those who will ask that I have completed the transition. Now I can walk between worlds freely, and I am not alone. There are many of us. We are watching, we are preparing. Soon the time will come when the border between sleep and reality will thin for everyone, and then they will come. Then she got up, entered the forest, and dissolved into the darkness. I tried to follow her, but she seemed to disappear, Lebedev said. After this meeting, the old woman was never seen again. There were, of course, stories about strange sightings in the forests of the Urals, about a woman who appeared and disappeared, about a glow between the trees, about whispers in an unknown language, but none of these testimonies was confirmed. In the 2000s, a group of paranormal researchers organized an expedition to the area where Maria Petrova was last supposedly seen. They hoped to find at least some traces or evidence of her existence, but instead encountered unexplained phenomena. The head of the expedition, Dmitry Karpenko, said, "On the very first night when we set up camp, strangeness began. All our electronic devices failed. Flashlights, radios, watches. Then, one by one, members of the group began to complain of insomnia. No one could fall asleep. Everyone felt anxiety, unease. On the second night, 2 of us saw a female figure on the edge of the camp. She stood motionless, as if watching us. When we pointed flashlights in that direction, there was no one there. On the third night, the strangest thing happened. We all heard a voice, a female voice, that seemed to sound directly in our heads. It spoke in a language that none of us knew, but somehow we all understood the meaning. Leave. You are not ready. It's not time yet." After this incident, all members of the expedition experienced severe malaise, headaches, nausea, dizziness set in, and the decision was made to break camp and return. But the most interesting thing happened when they returned to the city and developed the film from the cameras. The expedition used analog cameras due to problems with electronics. Several frames, taken at night in automatic mode, showed a strange luminous phenomenon. A blurred, bluish glow with vaguely human outlines. Photography experts who studied the pictures could not explain the phenomenon. No signs of editing or double exposure were found. These photographs became one of the few pieces of tangible evidence related to the story of Maria Petrova. But even they do not answer the main question: what really happened to the woman who did not sleep for 35 years? Was her insomnia the result of a disease unknown to science? Or, as some researchers suggested, did she actually establish contact with some beings beyond our understanding? In 2010, Russian neurophysiologist Anton Vasilyev, who worked at the Institute of the Human Brain of the Russian Academy of Sciences, published an article in which he analyzed all available medical data on the case of Maria Petrova. His conclusions were cautious but interesting. From the point of view of modern science, the complete absence of sleep for 35 years is impossible. The human body cannot function without the regenerative processes that occur during sleep. However, medical observations of the patient, conducted in various institutions over decades, revealed no signs of sleep in the traditional sense. This contradiction leads us to assume that either there is an unknown form of sleep that is not recorded by standard methods, or the patient's brain functioned on principles that are beyond our understanding of the physiology of the nervous system. Vasilyev also noted that modern science knows of cases of rare genetic mutations that allow people to function with significantly less sleep than usual. For example, carriers of the DEX2 gene mutation may feel rested after 4 to 5 hours of sleep instead of the usual 8. But a complete absence of the need for sleep has not been recorded in any confirmed carriers of genetic mutations. Perhaps Maria Petrova was a carrier of a unique combination of genetic mutations which, combined with certain external factors, led to the formation of a completely unique mode of brain function. But without the ability to conduct modern research, this hypothesis remains purely theoretical, Vasilyev wrote. As for Maria's predictions and invisible interlocutors, the scientist was even more cautious. There are many documented cases where people with various neurological peculiarities have demonstrated unusual abilities, from incredible memory to mathematical or musical talents. Perhaps the patient's altered state of consciousness allowed her to process information differently than an ordinary brain and find patterns where others saw only random events. This could create the illusion of predicting the future. However, not everyone agrees with such a rational explanation. Among paranormal researchers, the story of Maria Petrova is considered one of the most convincing pieces of evidence for the existence of other realities and the possibility of contact with them. The Petrova case is unique in that it combines a scientifically documented medical phenomenon of the absence of sleep for decades, with elements that science cannot explain. predicting the future, communicating with invisible entities, and a mysterious disappearance. This is not a story invented by lovers of mysticism, but a real case, confirmed by medical records, eyewitness accounts, and even documents from special services, says Alexander Prokhorov, head of the Phoenix Center for the Study of Anomalous Phenomena. In recent years, new evidence related to Maria Petrova has emerged. People living in remote settlements in the Ural Mountains tell of a strange old woman who sometimes appears in their homes at night. She sits by the beds of those who suffer from insomnia and tells stories. After such visits, people usually fall asleep and sleep soundly without dreams. My mother couldn't sleep after my father's death. Every night she lay awake until morning. This went on for almost a year. And then she came, a thin old woman with white hair and bright eyes, sat down next to her, took my mother's hand, and began to say something quietly. Mom doesn't remember what the story was about. But after that she fell asleep and slept for 14 hours. Since then, the insomnia has passed, says Anna Smirnova, a resident of the village of Verkhny Ufoli. There are dozens of such stories, and they are surprisingly similar to each other. The old woman always appears at night, always helps those who cannot sleep, and always disappears without a trace. Some storytellers claim to have seen her literally dissolve into thin air or pass through walls. Of course, skeptics consider these stories to be nothing more than modern folklore, urban legends that are spread among impressionable people. But those who have encountered the mysterious old woman are convinced of the reality of their experience. Another interesting observation was made by folklorist Igor Sokolov, who studied the legends of the peoples of the Urals. He found that in the mythology of the Mansi, Komi, and other indigenous peoples of the region, there are mentions of beings who do not need sleep and can travel between worlds. They were called guardians of the border or night watchmen. According to legends, these beings were once ordinary people, but underwent a special ritual that forever deprived them of the ability to sleep, but endowed them with other abilities. One of the Mansi legends tells of a woman who could not fall asleep after the death of her children. She wandered through the forest and reached a sacred mountain, where she met spirits. They offered her a deal. She would never sleep again, but she could help other people find peace. The woman agreed and became the guardian of dreams, Sokolov says. The parallels with the story of Maria Petrova are obvious. Perhaps she somehow came into contact with ancient beliefs and rituals when she worked in the archaeological expedition. Maybe touching the mysterious altar really triggered some inexplicable process. We will probably never know exactly what happened to Maria Petrova and where she disappeared, but her story makes us think about the limits of our understanding of the human consciousness and the secrets that may be hidden in the depths of the brain. Modern science tells us that sleep is necessary for life, that it is impossible to function without it. But the case of Maria Petrova calls into question this seemingly indisputable truth. What if there are states of consciousness that we don't even suspect? What if the boundary between sleep and wakefulness, reality and imagination, is not as strong as we are used to thinking? When we go to bed tonight, close our eyes and plunge into darkness. Maybe somewhere in the Ural Mountains there is an old woman with white hair and bright eyes wandering around. She has not slept for many decades, watching a world that never sees the same shadows that she sees. And perhaps sometimes she comes to those who cannot find peace, sits down next to them, and tells stories that she has heard from her invisible interlocutors, stories about places that are not on the map, about times that have long passed, and about those who are waiting beyond the border between sleep and reality. And maybe one day she will come to you too, on that night when sleep is elusive and the darkness outside the window seems especially thick and impenetrable. You will hear quiet steps, the creak of a door, feel a slight movement of air, and see a thin figure sitting on the edge of your bed. Don't be afraid, just listen, because the stories she tells open doors to worlds whose existence you never suspected.